have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. Trying to put a little color in my cheeks because I have a cold. If I cough, I'll try to avoid coughing in your faces.
And I know what everybody's been watching all week, which is, of course, the terrorist attacks around the world. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But in terms of LGBT news and AIDS news, well, Charlie Sheen has come out. And an uninformed and hysterical national conversation about HIV has ensued.
Yeah, it's run the gamut, so we'll break that down, but we'll mostly talk about what the important issues really are and how to talk about it and think about it and what its implications are. Also of interest is that, as predicted, thousands of Mormons showed up this last weekend to resign from the Mormon Church over their treatment of LGBT people.
Staying in Utah, the judge there who ordered a foster child taken away from a lesbian couple takes himself out of the case after an uproar.
And it's official, I think.
Yes.
The mayor-elect of Salt Lake City is a lesbian.
There's also a breakthrough federal court ruling in a transgender rights case in New York. This has implications for everyone across the country.
Justice Scalia of the United States Supreme Court has compared gay rights to rights for child molesters.
The alleged killer of a gay man in Houston escaped from a juvenile facility. We're on the lookout. He's very dangerous.
Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. Caitlyn Jenner says she does plan to vote for a Republican for president of the United States.
Well, at least it won't be Bobby Jindal. Same-sex marriages got underway in Ireland.
The Ukrainian parliament reversed itself positively on LGBT rights.
And I'm going to review George Takei and Leah Salonga in Allegiance, and also On Your Feet, the Gloria and Emilio Estefan musical.
But we want to start certainly first by acknowledging what happened in Paris last weekend.
And Beirut a week ago, and the Russian airliner, and the world is going to hell. But I have to say, as a 62-year-old person who has lived through a lot of wars and missteps in American foreign policy, starting with Vietnam in my memory, you know, the rush towards wanting to just go to war again over this and not think about how we're going to contain this threat is very, very alarming and depressing to me.
Well, Vietnam is in fact the analogy that's been occurring to me for the last week, because there is this great panicked rush to, oh, we have to go over there, we have to kill them, we have to wipe them out, we've been too passive, we haven't done enough, Obama's a failure, the real answer is just to go. You know, for some reason we've been holding back, but really the answer is just go kill them all, as if that's possible.
I mean, a lot of the people doing this are already here, are already American citizens.
Well,
if we're going to contain them, we have to have intelligence about finding them.
Even if they're all in one small town in Iraq, you cannot wipe them out this way, and the U.S. did learn that lesson in Vietnam and then immediately forgot it. The U.S. thought with all its military might it could go to the small country of Vietnam and carpet bomb its way to success, and eventually had to retreat, tail between its legs, admitting that you cannot wipe out an indigenous force like that.
We haven't won a war since World War II, if you want to consider that winning.
Let's not even open up the question of winning, losing.
Exactly.
No.
Well, I mean, you know, where countries surrender to each other and all this other kind of stuff.
But one thing we have reported for months, years now, is the treatment specifically of suspected or known LGBT people in these areas in the Middle East, and the fact that they are targeted murdered in various ways. First by the Iraq regime, by the people who took over there, the Al-Qaeda forces, by warring factions in Iran, in Iraq, everywhere. The condemnation of homosexuality throughout countries in the Middle East, and certainly ISIS has made a point to throw people off of buildings
on the pretext that they're homosexual.
Yes. So one concrete thing that may be interesting in this context is that next week on Tuesday, November 24th at 5:30 p.m., 5:30 to 8:30, there's going to be a panel discussion on LGBTIQ in Iraq, strategies to address persecution under ISIS. It's going to be run by Outright Action, which is the successor name to EagleHerc, the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission. It has several people from there and from CUNY Law School, including some Middle Eastern human rights workers as well as lawyers. But it should be a fascinating conversation, and they've given it a lot of time for once. Sometimes these things take place in an hour and a half and accomplish nothing. It's going to be done at Roosevelt House, which is part of Hunter College here in New York, at 47-49 East 65th Street. So that's Tuesday, November 24th at 5:30 p.m., 47 East 65th Street, Roosevelt House on Tuesday.
And I'm also outraged by what's almost emerging as the consensus American view that we shouldn't take in any Syrian refugees. We created Syrian refugees. We're the ones who disrupted that whole region and have created this mess. And now we're saying we don't want to take anybody. I mean, that is just outrageous.
Well, again, it's this. I've actually heard it from friends who have called me up and said, now, I know you're going to get angry at me for saying this, and I know we're going to have a fight over this, but I think they're right to close the borders, and we should not take any refugees. And I said, yeah, we are going to have a fight over this because it's just idiocy.
Right.
You're worried that there might be some terrorist among these refugees. What about the people who are shooting all the children in our schools right now that we're giving guns to?
Right.
Crazy.
Yes. Well.
So that's us.
That's us.
And that's the point of view you're going to get
here.
here.
Now let's move on to another crazy person, Charlie Sheen.
Well, segue. I was going to segue when you said winning, but we had more to cover.
As you have seen on the Today Show and on every newspaper in the country, and Charlie Sheen, who has been rumored to have HIV for years, owned up to it on the Today Show, says he's had it for 4 years. He says the diagnosis led to a lot of that period of substance abuse and extra craziness that he said he has to worry about. He says he has paid out $10 million in hush money to people who knew about this and then extorted him. I would be bringing some extortion cases if that were the case. He says he's being shaken down. He says he always informed his sexual partners, which was quickly denied by one of them who lived with him, Bree Olson, who said he never told me, although she herself does not have HIV. But this raises a million issues about because we don't have a lot of people don't come out about having HIV today who get it because the drugs are there and they can, live their lives, and why would they tell everybody?
Well, the drugs are there is shorthand for they are at a stage of having undetectable viral load. And what we've seen from studies is that there are no reported cases of transmission by people who have undetectable viral load. So when, when Charlie Sheen is asked whether he has transmitted to anyone or could have, and says impossible,
right.
It's because he has undetectable viral load. Now, for him to say that is crazy because, of course, he wasn't on these drugs the minute he got infected.
Right. But
there are no cases that have been publicized of him actually transmitting to anyone.
Right. Even though he apparently has had sex with thousands of people. Apparently of both genders.
Men, women, and transsexuals, as a National Enquirer reporter said on the Wendy Williams show this week.
Well, it certainly raises a lot of issues about HIV stigma that exists still today, sadly.
Well,
you know, he says, I'm not going to be a poster child for this, but he will speak out to some extent.
Look, I want to try to go through this a little. He says he doesn't know how he was infected, but no, he's never used needles. No. Although when he says roid rage was causing...
Yeah, you do use needles for steroids in some cases.
I don't know that it's
right.
mandatory, but that's one possibility. But he could have just said, well, I assume sexually. He could have done some education about HIV transmission. And it's interesting because there has been a range of reactions here. And I've watched a lot of different shows from Nancy Grace, who continues to say, well, Charlie Sheen is HIV. Is HIV.
Those three letters that are so hard to say, as Charlie said.
Not is HIV positive, not is infected with HIV, not is living with HIV.
It's like saying
HIV.
It's like saying he is cancer.
Well, it's like Chris Matthews saying the same sexers.
God.
I understand that a lot of knowledge has been gained and lost over the last few decades.
Well, we haven't kept up the conversation in the media. We haven't kept up the conversation because again, most people who contract the virus now do not come out about it publicly.
Exactly.
And why would they? But he's in a position that he was essentially being pursued by the media. And
well, one of my first questions was, you sit there complaining about having spent more than $10 million in blackmail payments to, unsavory, insipid types. That's his quote. So the first question becomes, well, why'd you pay him?
Right.
Why didn't you just come out about this 4 years ago?
Right.
And because he was very depressed, feeling shame, addicted, caught up in all of that, worried about his career.
Right. Still worried about his career, says he's broke.
Yeah, but some people, and he said, you know, they're taking the money away from my children. And people said, excuse me, but haven't you spent far more than that $10 million on paying for sex, paying for drugs, paying for everything?
$10 million, that's a lot of sex and drugs.
Oh, he's paid much more than that. You know who was the most rational in defending him? Heidi Fleiss. Heidi Fleiss has been interviewed on a number of shows and has been much more matter-of-fact about HIV infection and saying, you know, it happens. It can happen to anyone. It can happen the first time you have sex. It can happen to anyone. And this witch hunt is not appropriate,
right?
Which I agree with. So I think it is, I think he's lying about having informed all his sex partners. And I think that's terrible. But everybody, Nancy Grace and others, are quick to talk about two things. Everybody should sue him, who he didn't tell. They're not infected, mind you.
Right.
Everyone who's been tested, no infection, no cases yet. No one has proved that he's infected them. But but Nancy Grace, Wendy Williams, the whole pack, want everybody to sue him.
And he also has to worry about HIV criminalization.
Exactly.
Where, you know, there are some places where if you don't inform, now of course a lot of this happened in California where the law is a little different, but there is a law. But in some states, I mean, you know, if you don't inform your partner and you know you have it, whether or not you transmit anything, you can go to jail for 25 years.
And whether or not you're using protection.
Right. Or whether you're undetectable or any of that stuff.
Or whether your partners are on PrEP,
right?
Any of it. And the story about his current partner, in the universe of partners he may have at any given moment, is that she is on PrEP, and that they're using condoms. Although she specified They're using lambskin condoms.
Which we always advise people not to use
Yes,
because they're more porous.
And yes, they have bigger holes. And that led Nancy Grace, of course, into a discussion of lambskin condoms. Do they protect? Only against pregnancy.
Well, I hope he's talking to his father, Martin Sheen, because his father has a bit of a record as an AIDS activist and was at the speech that Larry Kramer gave in 1987 that it led to the forming of ACT UP. I was sitting right next to him at the time, and he has spoken out about AIDS over the years as a social justice issue.
Howard Stern was also a little hysterical about this and immediately had his some ex-partners on claiming that they didn't inform him. And the women on the talk just called him a lying addict.
Well, it's increased some of the hysteria around it.
It's quite a spectacle. And to the extent that it is a punitive spectacle, it's disgusting and hard to listen to. To the extent that some people are a little more rational and informative, that's good. But one would not have predicted that this would be our next conversation in the AIDS epidemic.
Okay. Let's talk about our next conversation and what's happening in the world of religion. We had the spectacle this week, and we have some B-roll about this, of more than 2,000 Mormons in Salt Lake City. They came to Salt Lake City, go to resign from their church over the labeling of gay members as apostates and denying baptism to the children of same-sex couples, which was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back because it's the kids. There was a big public protest on Saturday. This policy has
1,500 people have resigned, and they're doing another one this Saturday.
This policy has even offended conservatives. Now, a lot of the people who were resigning acknowledge I haven't been going to church in a long time, but separating yourself from the faith is a very big deal in the Mormon church because it's all, that's why they have those centers of genealogy where you trace all your ancestors. It's all about getting all your family saved under their system. So now, the church tried to clarify, and they say if you're already baptized, you're okay, you're not going to be thrown out. The denial only applies if the child lives, if the child's primary residence is with the gay couple, and they're same-sex married as. If they're same sex. Well, they have to be married. That's the thing. It's the marriage thing that seems to have gotten them all upset.
They also say there's a local
They commit to each other in love
option.
and commitment, you hate them. If they just don't talk about it, it's fine.
Well, we were worried last week about whether kids of divorced parents, one gay, one straight.
Well, they're saved now. They can still be saved. But it's great because, again, this is a church in which it takes a lot of courage in order to resign.
Now, the other thing we were looking at there was this case of the lesbian couple who had taken in a foster child.
Judge Scott Johansson, we have a picture of him there, ordered a foster child removed from the care of lesbian moms, April Hoagland and Becky Pierce. We have a picture of them as well. Despite the recommendation of the Utah Division of Child and Family Services, he cited research that kids do better raised by heterosexual parents, and then he wouldn't show his research.
Because it's the Regnerus study that has been so discredited.
It must be on the internet. The Utah Republican governor, Guy Herbert, said that the judge ought to follow the law, and he called the judge's action activism from the bench, so even the right wing was getting upset about this. Friday, the judge reversed his order pending a hearing. He was going to have a hearing, first of all, he was going to have a hearing about the best interests of the child. So he wasn't giving up on this. He just wasn't going to automatically remove the kid. But on Monday, he removed himself from the case. The women had moved to have him removed from the case, and were threatening essentially, impeachment.
Yeah, I think the December 4th hearing might still take place. I'm not sure about that. But if any of you are curious or need to know about what the real state of studies is on parenting by same-sex parents, there is an online archive that is maintained at Columbia University Law School where you can get 73 studies. And it's called What We Know, .law.columbia.edu
Right.
for the gay parenting studies.
Let's stay in Salt Lake City for a moment, shall we? It's
Sure.
official. Jackie Biskupski, 49 years old. We have a picture of her. That's what Jackie looks like after she found out that she won. An out lesbian is the new mayor-elect of Salt Lake City, beating the two-term incumbent Ralph Becker with 51.5% of the vote. And Jackie was in the state legislature as an out lesbian as well.
Now, they had some automatic kind of recount or re-looking at the vote mechanism that I thought was later. No?
This I'm told, is official now.
All right. Well, I do have to make a correction about something I said next week as we move on to Houston.
Something you said last week, you mean?
Last week, yes. Sorry, my head's a little foggy.
That's all right.
As we were discussing the vote on the Equal Rights Ordinance in Houston, we discussed whether or not there was also on the ballot the Houston mayoral office, and I said, oh no, that's another year or two down the road. But I was wrong. In fact, there was a vote on the next Houston mayor, and there's going to be a runoff between a Democrat who is in favor of the Equal Rights Ordinance and a Republican who is very right-wing and against it. And because there is this runoff on December 12th, the right-wing people who got rid of the Equal Rights Ordinance
are bringing back the bathroom ads and running them again, saying, the people who voted for the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, you've got to stop them because they want to let men go into girls' bathrooms and molest girls. I mean, they won. They got rid of Hero that way, and they think they're going to get rid of these candidates that way.
And they also think they're going to get rid of an existing statute in Dallas. They're taking these ads to Dallas after Dallas expanded its ordinance to explicitly cover transgender people.
I mean, Dallas has had a gay rights ordinance since 2002, and they just amended it unanimously to strengthen the transgender protections. And they're going to run these same ads. But Dallas also has it's harder to get it. They also, by the way, encoded this in the charter in Dallas in 2014, LGBT rights. But
that's not going to stop the right
and it got 77% of the vote. Well, it might make it harder. And the other reason it might be harder in Dallas is because they need 50,000 signatures to get on the ballot, which is far more than the 17,000 that they needed in Houston.
Well, I'd also like to think that my favorite story of the week is another reason it's going to be harder for the right wing, and that is that one of the leaders of the anti-equal rights ordinance movement in Houston is a lawyer who represents a man who photographed 7 women in the bathroom of his home 10 years ago. He just took pictures of them in the bathroom. He was a man taking pictures. Yes.
My God.
So they're suing him, and his lawyer is one of the leaders of the No Men in Women's Bathrooms movement in Houston.
It's
you can't make this stuff up,
surrealism
folks.
in everyday life, as my friend Ann would say.
Quoting Gloria Steinem.
Okay.
All right. Other news.
Where are we going?
I don't know. Where do you want to go?
Well, we got another religion story.
Yeah.
The Chicago Archdiocese has fired another gay employee of a Catholic church for getting married, Sandor Demkovich, the music director at St. Andrew the Apostle in Calumet City, actually. 17 years the music director there. He has filed a complaint with the EEOC, and I don't want to know, where is the Catholic Church going to get music directors if you don't want to hire gays?
They've got a long list
that is not a joke.
Firees. Well, the guy who was fired says the pastor was supporting his relationship and wanted to attend the wedding until he posted an announcement about it on Facebook.
Well, that's encouraging. But he needs to...
No, it's not encouraging, because in the end, and when the rubber meets the road, I don't think I've ever said that on this show.
Here's what I am marking as progress, that the pastor spoke out and didn't just go quietly.
He's the one who fired him.
Should he? Well, the Archdiocese insisted. Look, fine.
Yes, and when faced with a choice...
No, fine. I think people should resign.
Yes.
I think lots of people resign from presidential administrations when they goes against them. That kind of stuff. Yes, all that stuff.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I don't disagree with you.
I'm saying it's slight progress that he spoke out. That's all.
Here's the thing. You can have all the good intentions you want, but if when push comes to shove, to use another cliche, you go with the powers that be in their discriminatory practices, you have not advanced the cause of human rights.
And the Catholic bishops who met in Baltimore this past week gave a standing ovation to the Archbishop, who is the ambassador from the Vatican to the United States, who set up the meeting between the Pope and Kim Davis, and they wrung their hands about same-sex marriage, and they vowed to fight it the way they fight abortion. You know, they're never going to give up.
Well, they're going to fight with these religious freedom amendments, and that is their strategy for the foreseeable future. And there's a bad one coming along in Indiana. That's going to be the locus of the next big state fight.
Now, if you watch the show, and even if you read the mainstream press, you know there was a big fight in Indiana, wasn't there, about the Religious Freedom Act, and they pulled back on it. But now they want to install the entire thing into their LGBT rights law. So, as I think it's our friend Rex who said, you know, they want to protect LGBT rights, except for people who want to discriminate against LGBT people.
Well, this started because our side said after the fight last year, we want to expand and codify LGBT rights in our state human rights law or whatever. And so we're going to the legislature with a bill that adds gender identity and sexual orientation to the human rights law.
Now, the legislature doesn't meet again until January, but they had a meeting this week where it's the
Organization Day.
It's the Republicans, imagine that. It's the Republicans who are proposing this bill. I assume there'll be a counter bill from the Democrats.
Well, the Democrats are all set to offer their expansion of equal rights. But the Republicans said, well, we want to offer our version of equal rights. We want to protect people, except that we want to give everybody the right to discriminate. We want to make sure that no one can fight that. You'll incur a fine or a penalty if you try to fight this.
Wedding services exempted, daycare centers exempted, adoption centers, schools don't have to treat transgender people fairly. It goes on and on and on and on and on.
Unbelievable.
It's just the worst. Look, that's why we need...
It's not a step backwards, it is a staircase backwards.
That's why we all need the Federal Equality Act, and I hope you're getting your congressperson on board. Call them tomorrow if you haven't already.
That would be nice. A couple of dueling decisions in the states on custodial issues. In Alabama, the Supreme Court, we found out in September, had voided the adoption of 3 kids by the non-biological parent in a lesbian couple.
They were adopted, and they went to Georgia for the adoption, and the Alabama court said, well, we don't recognize that. Well,
yeah, the adoption happened in 2007.
Yes.
So the couple has now split, and the biological mom of the kids wants to refuse visitation, custody, everything.
These couples do this to each other.
I know. So the
using the law, but the thing is that the high court there said, you know, it's an invalid law, and they're not supposed
invalid adoption.
Yeah, they're not supposed. Well, they're not supposed. What they're saying is they're not supposed to be able to adopt in this way. Is basically what the court was saying. But it's not up to the Alabama court to say that. The Georgia court is not saying that. That's a matter for Georgia, not for Alabama, and that's why they are appealing this to the United States Supreme Court. It's an NCLR case. Right.
And meanwhile, in Oklahoma, a good ruling from the Supreme Court there, which says a lesbian who is the ex of the bio mom of their children is suing for parental rights and custody of a child that they conceived together, planned together, but you have to have one person carry the child, and so she did, but then when they split, then comes this fight. And a lower court said that the non-biological mother could not be treated as a parent, but the Oklahoma Supreme Court said nonsense, she can, even though this was all an arrangement that preceded same-sex marriage legality. They clearly were a couple. They clearly planned this child together, and thus they must be treated as a couple having a dispute over parental rights and custody.
It was a 9-0 decision and a landmark decision.
Very good.
All right. Well, maybe
Back to Chicago, where the Chicago House, which provides social services for, among others, LGBT youth, was having a lunch at which Caitlyn Jenner was speaking. Transgender protesters showed up to protest her as the speaker, too rich, too clueless.
She lives in a mansion and doesn't understand transgender people in the streets.
She went out and tried to talk to them politely. That didn't get very far.
Then their chant was, "I ain't Kate."
And then she went off to meet with UN Ambassador Samantha Power and tell her that she wants to work on international rights.
And then she went on a show and said that she still intends to vote for the Republican for President of the United States.
Well, you know, her reality show on E! Has been renewed, so they're traveling around doing various events, and they wanted to take her to the Democratic debate in Iowa.
Couldn't get a ticket.
Couldn't get it. CBS would not give her a ticket, so she watched it with a bunch of students at the university where it was being held, Drake, and she told them that she was...
I'm not hearing what I need to hear.
They haven't convinced me.
Wow.
Maybe
some crime stories.
Well, I was going to run through other transgender-related news.
Yeah. Well, there was that ruling in New York that we should talk about.
Yes.
This is the Second Circuit, so it's federal court. In a first, Judge Jed Rakoff ruled that a transgender person's equal protection claim will receive heightened scrutiny, which is intermediate scrutiny, in the case called Adkins versus the City of New York, mistreatment after arrest in an Occupy demonstration.
Occupy Wall Street demonstration a few years ago. Lots of people arrested, so this transgender man was put in the cell. When you're arrested in civil disobedience in New York in a crowd like this, you're put in these cells with scores of your best friends who you've been demonstrated with, and sometimes other populations also, but you're in a big group. So he was put in this cell with the men, and then they realized he was transgender, and they singled him out, took him out of there, and handcuffed him to a railing by the bathroom for 7 hours.
By a toilet, you know, it's just absolutely outrageous. And made fun, asked about her genitals.
Yeah, the cops coming by and making just endless transphobic
But the reason
remarks.
this is so significant, whatever the outcome of the case, because the case isn't finalized, is by invoking heightened scrutiny, it does not allow the City of New York to just raise a rational basis claim. We had some reason for doing this.
You have to really prove you had a good reason for doing this.
And they applied the standard in the Windsor case to transgender people for the first time, and that's why it's important for all of us.
Also, there's a new transgender equality task force among members of the U.S. House of Representatives. 9 members of the House, all Democrats, soon to be joined by Ileana Ross-Lehtinen, who has a trans son, Republican.
Led by Representative Mike Honda from California, who has a trans granddaughter.
Right. They are going to focus on trans issues. They held a little forum hearing on violence against transgender people. So the issues are being raised in Congress.
And lest we forget, Transgender Day of Remembrance is this Saturday, November 21st. Do some Googling about the Transgender Day of Remembrance. You may find events in your part of the country.
Well, one depressing thing you may find is a new study of trans residents in the District of Columbia, right there by Congress. A survey that has been conducted and analyzed over the last 5 years of over 521 trans people in D.C. More than 46% earn less than $10,000 a year. Half, less than $10,000 a year. A third are unemployed. Half reported experiencing workplace harassment. 13% reported being physically assaulted at the workplace. 36% have engaged in sex work.
Limits to their education.
Yes, vastly higher numbers of HIV infection, on and on and on. This is a report put together by the DC Trans Coalition, and it's horrendously depressing and
we have a lot of work to
illuminating.
do. You know, we hear, look, transgender issues are certainly being, we're working on trying to understand them better and all these kinds of things. And we hear from viewers from time to time say, they are among those who say, well, this is not a gay issue. Well, I mean, we are all in this together. And believe me, the reason that most gay and lesbian people are discriminated against in this country is because we cross gender norms just by going out with someone of the same gender. So let's try to stick together on this, okay? All right.
Ridiculous footnote, Dancing with the Stars has vetoed a male-male dancing to a gay song that a guest performer
And
is
then on the
gonna do.
legal front, there's Justice Scalia, who gave a talk at Georgetown where he said gay rights are not rooted in the Constitution, and the logic that you're using on these cases could just as easily apply to child molesters. I mean, he said that. He says, what minorities deserve protection? What? It's up to me to identify deserving minorities? He said that...
he believes civil rights should be voted on.
He said molesters are a deserving minority. Everybody hates them. Or actually, he said nobody loves them. I'm sorry I misquoted him.
God.
Just awful.
All right. Well, on that note, we should turn to stories of violence against people.
Okay. Well,
yes, Michael Wright was a draft pick of the New York Knicks a few years ago. He was murdered here in New York in Brooklyn, and he was believed to have been the victim of someone he met on a Grindr hookup.
First, they thought it was a suicide. He had a bag over his head, but then they found some injuries that indicated
When they
that
took
he
the
was
bag
murdered.
off, they found he had a big head wound.
Yes.
That was their first clue that he'd been murdered.
So. Let's see. Then we have the Houston case. We really want to bring this to your attention. The killer of a gay man escaped a juvenile detention center. Alferis Kobe, 16 years old. Do we have this picture? You're going to get it up there, please. He is charged in the capital murder of Carlos Rodriguez, 22 years old, who was shot in the parking lot.
That is Michael
Wright.
The
That's Michael
Knicks
Wright.
draftee. No. Keep going.
It's an Alferis Kobe is an African
A
American.
young black man.
Please, folks.
Get rid of this picture. Please get rid of this picture. Thank you.
All right, we'll call for that later. I hope you have the picture of Alferis Kobe, 16. He shot Carlos in the parking lot of the F-Bar gay nightclub in March. He is seen as an exceptionally high risk for violence, and if you have any information about his whereabouts, call 713-222-8477.
Well, now we can go back to the white guy we showed, because he's...
yeah, go ahead. We can put that up.
Yeah, there's him. He is the suspected or the Palm Springs assaulter.
Yes. Who
He's
beat up
been arrested. He's one of those suspected of beating up George and Chris Zander in Palm Springs. We told you about that case last week. An older gay couple assaulted on the street in the middle of the afternoon. He has been arrested, but there are others thereafter in that case.
And then in Spring, Texas, the body of a gay man, Mark Porner, P-O-U-R-N-E-R, 28 years old, I have a picture of him, was found. No, was found dead.
They're having a little trouble in the control room.
That's him. That's Mark Porner. Found dead, slumped beside his burnt truck, bound, gagged, blunt trauma, not yet being investigated as a hate crime, but a source close to the investigation said that they're close to an arrest.
I believe we have the picture of the escaped Texas murderer, if we can take a second to show that to you so you have an idea of who it is who is being sought.
This is Alferis, A-L-F-E-R-I-S, Kobe, 16 years old. He escaped from a juvenile detention center. He is alleged to have killed Carlos Rodriguez.
And there's also a terrible story out of San Francisco of a trans woman, Samantha Hulsey, who has now been attacked on the street for the second time by random bigots and beaten up badly, and it's a terrible thing. You walk down the street and you get attacked.
And here's a story about how not to get your lover back. In Paynesville, Ohio, that's the actual name of the place, 51-year-old Paul Forner, F-O-R-N-E-R, wanted his ex-lover to move with him to Tennessee from Ohio. So he set fire to the country club that his ex-lover worked in so that he'd lose his job and have to go with him. Well, he has been sent to, he pleaded
a little extreme.
He pleaded guilty, and he has been given a 5-year sentence. Oh my God.
In Seattle, Starbucks has announced that it will train 2,000 employees in 97 stores to help LGBT victims of violence. So if someone comes in from off the street and says, I just got attacked, the Starbucks employees will know what to do.
When I go to Camden Town in London, there are stickers all over the place from the local gay group saying, this church, this store, you can come in here if something happens, you need to be safe. It would be nice if they did this all over the place.
And
all over the country.
In memory of a long ago attack from 23 years ago, Michael Petrelis has just published on his blog the 900-page Navy file on the unbelievably brutal murder of Alan Schindler by his shipmates at a stop in the Philippines, Korea.
I think the trial was in Japan.
Somewhere in the East. In Asia.
Michael flew over for that trial and drew a lot of public attention to it. I remember his mom, Dorothy Hages was her name, became an activist as a result.
Yep. And this was all around Veterans Day celebrations too. So you can go to Michael Petrelis' blog to read the file. They put up a headstone for Frank Kameny in Congressional Cemetery. Near Leonard Matlovich was also honored at the ceremony. 14,000 wrongly discharged members of the military who are LGBT are awaiting upgrades and benefits.
In Lake Lure, North Carolina, the school board there has suspended all school clubs after parents objected to an LGBT group there. They're seeking legal counsel to see what they're... one grandmother complained that she had to explain the meaning of gay and lesbian to her grandchildren. I'll bet the grandchildren could explain it to you, Grandma, if you asked them nicely.
Probably.
On the other hand, John Kasich, who was running, who was supposed to be the reasonable Republican in the field, wants a U.S. agency to be established to teach our Judeo-Christian values abroad to counter what he calls Islamist propaganda in the Middle East, and also problems in China and Iran and Russia. He calls it a Western ethic. It means freedom, opportunity, respect for women, freedom to gather, none of which you respect.
And none of which prevail in many of the religions you want to teach.
And defunding Planned Parenthood.
There was an exciting meeting in Harlem in New York City last week. Community Board 10 held a meeting of its LGBTQ task force. 100+ people came to the meeting, and another 100 people couldn't get in. They were waiting out on the street. It seems to be you should have found a way to let them in.
Up in Harlem?
Yeah. Active community forming up there.
I went to the memorial service for John McNeil, which that Dignity sponsored this weekend, the gay priest pioneer who wrote The Church and the Homosexual in 1976. And I heard a story about him I had never heard. And in the context of all we've been dealing with this week, I thought I'd repeat it. When he was an anti-war priest, but he also worked in Paris in the 50s, and they saw, you're a real activist. We're going to have you work with some people that nobody else wants to work with. The orphan children of French women by German soldiers. No one will touch them. And he did that kind of work before he got into all the gay work and everything else.
Same thing happened with the children of U.S. servicemen in Vietnam.
Absolutely.
The stigmas continue.
So, folks, we create these issues, create these problems, and we blame the wrong people.
In Alabama, a good footnote to a case, a federal judge has agreed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that sexual orientation discrimination is sex discrimination, but says the plaintiff in the case, a gay man, had not succeeded in proving he was discriminated against enough yet. But if he had, that would have been actionable as sex discrimination under this judge, which is very good in an Alabama federal judge.
Are we going to run this Barbie ad?
Oh, sure, let's do. Mosquito Barbie, the newest topic of conversation other than, you know, terror and Charlie Sheen.
Mosquito Barbie. She's the most mosquito Barbie ever. Totally hot, totally
How you doing?
Totally mosquito Barbie is so fierce. Look at those shoes that felt her hair, covered in gold with mosquito hair. I love you, mosquito Barbie. She's the girl who has it all. Nothing can stop her. Please hold while she takes this call. It's for you, mosquito Barbie.
Mosquito Barbie doll fabulosity totally included.
We've won. How charming. We're all
Too gay as a stereotype or equal opportunity for feminine gay boys?
I think it's
Take
great.
your pick.
He's just a boy.
Yeah. Well, no, he's a gay boy. Let's be clear here.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm glad to see him there, and I do think it's equal opportunity. That's great. The White House has told the Washington Blade that President Obama will discuss LGBT rights in his upcoming trip to Brunei and Malaysia.
Yeah.
Even though they're not mentioned in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. I say don't hold your breath for anything important.
All right.
All right.
International news.
Yeah, we'll segue with that.
You know, the Pope condemned the attacks on Paris. Duh. But of course, he couldn't convey his condolences to the French ambassador to the Vatican because he's openly gay, and the Pope won't accept him. But Vatican,
you know, the French ambassador to the U.S. is openly gay, and he's been leading a lot of the response.
But the Vatican officials did meet with Randy Berry, the U.S. Special Envoy for Human Rights of LGBTI persons. No word on what they talked about, but...
well, Randy said they talked about violence against gay people and discrimination, not family issues like marriage. He wanted to, you know, ease into it.
Well, how about the bullying that the church does against us?
I wonder whether that came up. I suspect not.
Okay. In the Ukraine, a reversal.
Yes.
The parliament passed an anti-discrimination bill that it had rejected a couple of weeks ago for sexual orientation and gender identity. This is critical for Ukrainians to be able to travel throughout Europe without a visa.
Although they better hurry because all the borders are going to be closed to everybody any minute.
It took 6 rounds of voting, but they did it.
As one parliamentarian said, it is better to have a gay parade than Russian tanks in Kiev.
In the United Kingdom, they're deporting, we have a picture of a Ugandan man, Robert Kitio of Manchester. It is not accepted that you are a homosexual and an openly gay man. 30 people, including LGBT groups and a bishop, sent letters for him. 1,900 people petitioned for him. His partner is in jail in Uganda, but this isn't good enough for the immigration board, and this is also about the tightening of borders.
Well, although historically in England, they've tried to send a lot of people back claiming that they had not proved they were gay. And it is just, you know, what are they going to do? Anal examinations like like ISIS does?
Yes.
Terrible.
All right.
In Chile, a compromise has been reached. The gay activists will drop a lawsuit for marriage. The government will propose a marriage bill in 2016. They currently allow civil unions adoptions, LGBT inclusive. Oh, the bill in 2016 will include marriage, allow adoption by people in civil unions, LGBT inclusive sex ed, gender identity rights, a hate crimes bill, equalize the age of consent, and repeal the immorality law.
Same-sex weddings did get underway in Ireland. The first wedding, we have a picture of the guys.
The happy couple, as they say.
Was Cormac Galagly and Richard Dowling together for 12 years. They're from South Tipperary. You're not going to show that cute picture of them up there on the screen kissing? There they are. And if we have time at the end, we'll show you a little tape of them. And you should look them up on the internet. Just Google First Irish Wedding, and you can watch the whole thing.
And they're having a fight in Estonia. They passed a cohabitation act, which would give equal rights to both gay and straight couples who live together. but they have to pass implementation legislation before it goes into effect January 1st. And there's now a coalition government there that contains some right-wingers who don't want it.
And in Jerusalem, May Peleg, 31, a transgender activist and the owner of a gay pub there in Jerusalem, and the head of the Executive Committee of Jerusalem Open House, took her own life this week. And one of the reasons it's in the news is because the biological family that rejected her is now trying to block her cremation in court, which she expressly wished for in her will. Her mom wants her buried as her son. They're Orthodox. Terrible.
Don't people have better things to do?
All right.
AIDS news is certainly dominated by Charlie Sheen this week, but there's also news from the CDC of rises in gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia, especially among men who have sex with men.
And Orrin Hatch has withdrawn his support for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP.
Really?
Because it doesn't protect pharmaceutical companies enough. And the White House...
I did read that earlier, you're right.
And, as long as we're on Big Pharma, the Mallinckrodt company, pharmaceuticals, has raised the price of a drug for infant seizures by 2,000%. So it's not just, AIDS drugs or this drug, it's all drugs.
The New York Governor Cuomo has signed the medical marijuana expedited access bill, which gives immediate access for those most in need, as the details of the full program of access to medical marijuana is still worked out. But of course, the whole medical marijuana scheme in New York is not a good scheme and is not going to help as many people as it should.
Okay. Entertainment news.
Sure.
Well, we were looking forward to the musical Allegiance with George Takei. This is a musical about the internment of West Coast Japanese. There's George with Leah Salonga making her Broadway comeback. This is a shameful chapter in American history, worse than the shameful one we're living through right now, but very similar. It's all about fear of the other. Telly Leung plays the George Takei character. Well, George plays the grandfather in the family that's taken to the camp. Telly Leung plays him as his grandson, who eventually grows up to be George Takei, and volunteers to fight. Leah Salonga is the sister. It's a very important story. It's heartfelt told, but it's less than engaging musical. But our associate producer, Bill Ballman, loved it.
I'm looking forward to the movie Carol opening this weekend in New York, at least. The Kate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, lesbian love story of
Patricia Highsmith's novel, Price of Salt.
Price of Salt. And Frank Rich did a really good piece in the New York Magazine about how lesbian culture is invisible. I say, thank God.
Why do you say that?
Because they've ruined everything else. Let us have our own little world.
Okay.
Although if you watch The L Word, maybe you'll learn something. But Carol has gotten great reviews.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And I loved On Your Feet, the story of Emilio and Gloria Estefan. It's a very engaging musical, and of course it's driven by their hit songs, which is great stuff, which is better than most of what you get on Broadway. And it has a great book by Alexander Dinelaris, and good performances by Anna Villafane and Josh Segarra, and especially Alma Cuervo, who plays the Gloria's grandmother, who just steals the show, as does this little kid who does a lot of dance numbers. Unbelievable. Yeah. So I had a great time. It's, it's 2.5 hours long, and I was never bored, and the music is great.
And you saw it with my neighbor, an authentic Cuban-American lesbian.
And we're all on our feet. By the end, they demand it.
All right, I now have to do an imitation of Billy Eichner from Billy on the Street. I need a single camera.
Okay.
In the middle of his show last week, he's doing all these various bits, but then you cut to a shot. Come on, give me my camera. Thank you. Billy just standing on the street, and out of nowhere, he just looks at the camera and he says, "Queen Latifah, we're waiting." That's the whole thing. Then he goes on to 6 other things.
She doesn't care.
No, evidently not.
And if you want a great antidote to all the horrible things in the world that are happening right now, try to catch Frederick Weissman's 3-hour documentary about Jackson Heights, Queens. which I had the opportunity to see. We have some B-roll from it maybe there. A lot of it centers on gay life in Jackson Heights, but also the Colombians, the Bengalis, the Indians, the South Asians. Everybody is in it. It just restores your faith in humanity. It also talks about how the neighborhood is being threatened by developers now, that it's become so popular. But it's about everybody getting along, everybody working together, cheering each other on. It is so, I would highly recommend it.
And we need that breath of fresh air. But another breath of fresh air was the marriage in Ireland, the first marriage. And there's a charming news report from Ireland about the first same-sex marriage in the Republic of Ireland this week. So we do have a couple of minutes, so let's show
go out
you
with that.
Congratulations, Richard and Cormac. You are the first same-sex couple to be civilly married in Ireland on the 17th of November 2015. Congratulations.
Oh.
Well done.
Well, we're 12 years together.
12 years.
Yeah,
We met in 2003 when we were both 22. I met on the 7th of March, and by the 10th of March we were a couple. How we met actually was kind of funny. A friend was asking me, what kind of guy do you like, Cormac? And I was like, just kind of looked around the room, and I spotted Richard across the room, and I saw him walking through the crowd, and I just, for the phone, just went, that guy there, and he caught me pointing right at him. So I just, the rest of the day is history then. We obviously got together that night, and we were together,
ever since.
Yeah.
So we are gathered here in the presence of each other in order that these men, Richard and Cormac, should be joined together in the covenant of marriage. So, Richard, do you take Cormac to be your lawful wedded spouse?
I do.
Will you love him and comfort him in sickness and in health?
I will.
And Cormac, do you take Richard to be your lawful wedded spouse?
I do.
Will you love him and comfort him in sickness and in health?
I will.
Cormac, I give you this ring
As a symbol that I will love, honour and respect you.
as a symbol that I will love, honour and respect you.
May this ring always remind you
May this ring always remind you
of the vows and promises we have made here today.
of the vows and promises we have made here today.
Cormac, again, if you place the ring on Richard's finger. Richard, I give you this ring.
Richard, I give you this ring.
As a symbol that I will love, honour and respect you.
As a symbol that I will love, honour and respect you.
May this ring always remind you
May this ring always remind you
A few
of
seconds.
the vows and promises we have made here today.
of the vows and promises we have made here today.
Very good. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Civil Registration Act 2004, as Richard Dowling and Cormac Galogly have solemnly bound themselves in wedlock before you, their witnesses and friends, I now pronounce you civilly married in accordance with the law of 2015. I now pronounce you. Should I pronounce you husband and husband? Congratulations, I pronounce you husband and husband.
Actually,